Hey, what's up, YouTube? Alright, my people. I have a little thing I want to talk about. Well, a friend of mine just called me from England. Well, he kind of hit me up on WhatsApp from England. And he asked me about the difference between 110 current and 220. And, the reason why, people use the 220 as opposed to the 110 and vice versa. So I figured I'd just go and do a little video about it. So, back in the days, most of the amplifiers were 110. I mean, even today, a lot of the amplifiers first come when you plug them into the wall, it's 110. And, that's kind of how it is. What is 110? What is 220? 120 or 110, depending on where you are. You have one hot leg, one neutral leg, and a ground. That is what's considered 110, 120. And again, the 110, 120 would depend on where you are and how the voltage is running and things. So that's the 110. 220 is two hot legs, a neutral and a ground. So it's basically 2 times 110 to get you 220. And that's how it is. Back in the days though, most of the older amplifiers, if you wanted to play 220, you would have to flick a switch in it or do some kind of different something. You had to do something to get it to work into 220. They weren't just automatically 220. You would have to do some kind of modification, either a switch or some different kind of wiring thing to get it to work in 220. Nowadays, the modern amplifiers have what they call a smart power supply. You plug them in, and they automatically switch from 110 to 220. Like the amplifiers that I'm using, the CVRs, the PowerSoft, the AdMarks, all of those amplifiers, when you plug them into a 220 circuit, it automatically adapts to the 220. So you don't have to do anything at all to the amplifier to get them to play in 220. My system is all 220. And he was asking, how do you get 220? Well, you would have to definitely build a power distribution that plays 220. So my system is 220 all the way. Each amplifier have its own breaker. So it's wired to play 220 to each amplifier with a separate breaker. What is the difference? What does it make? What difference does it make as it relates to how the sound plays? Well, the sound plays a lot more efficient in 220. It's just a lot more power. Because remember, speakers use voltage. So if you're playing a 110 voltage to the speaker, you can't get maximum efficiency out of an amplifier with the 110. It plays decent. Because, that's what we used to do back in the days. But you get a lot more out of the amplifier. It's a lot more efficient. It plays. You're able to deliver maximum power out of an amplifier with 220. Whereas in 110, you really can't get maximum efficiency out of the amplifier. So, in a nutshell, it makes more sense if you can to play 220. Even though there are still sounds playing 110. But if you can, 220 would be preferred. I noticed a huge difference when I switched. Because when I first bought the CVRs, the distro that I had was a 20 amp. Each circuit was 20 amp and it was 110. And I noticed when I played the sound, as soon as you drop the bass line, the breakers would chip. Every time. It would chip the breaker every time because it really wasn't enough to play those amplifiers at any kind of volume. You feel me? You could play them, but you have to play them quite low. But if you're trying to get them to play hard, the 110 is definitely not enough. See? And even a 20 amp breaker is not enough to play those amps. You have to use bigger breakers because they're quite power hungry. So each one of my amplifiers right now are 220 30 amp. You understand? Each one of the bass amp have a 30 amp breaker on it separately. So when you can drop the bass and feel the bass without worrying about the breaker chipping the app chipping the individual breakers, right? If you're using a mean breaker for the sound system, the whole system with 6, 7, 8 amplifiers, then you need a big breaker, like a 120, 150 breaker. Like my sound system, if you play it on a 60 or 7 or so breaker, 60 amp breaker, it's going to chip. The other day when I was playing, I as soon as I turn on the bass, it chipped out the 60 amp breaker. So I had to hardwire it into the generator to play, because I have 8 pieces of this EVR, and they're very power hungry. So you hardwire it into the generator and you can play it as hard as you want with no problem. 220 straight out of the generator with no breaker in between the generator and your distros, because remember, the sound system have its own distro, so you really don't need a breaker in between. You know, you don't need a box in between your sound and the generator or the power source. If we're not playing from a generator, we're coming straight from the hot legs, from on top of the power box in a building. You know, we don't go to breakers and stuff. We go on the top and hook up the wires where the main wires come into the building. So again, you have 2 hot legs, you have the neutral leg and the ground leg, so you come off of the top of the box before it goes into the building, the big breaker that controls the building. That's where we go, on top of that. And again, it's broken down into our distros, because each amplifier have its own breaker. So yeah, that's the 220, 110 thing, and what's different about them. Jump in the comments. Again, I like when people jump into the comments and let me know what they think. Do you think 110 is and 220 is a big difference? Do you think 220 is more efficient? Does it make no difference at all? What do you think? Let me know. Alright, anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next video.
Sound boy, toiling in the day and soul. A disappointed sound boy who has no double plates at all.